So, good afternoon, sir. We are delighted to host Mr. Krishnan Subramaniam. So, almost a person with 4 decades of experience across countries like Middle East, Singapore, and India, and companies like Bharat Petroleum, Shell, and currently with Transworld. So, sir, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
So, we'd just like to start off the podcast with a question in terms of how has your leadership journey been? What are the capabilities or competencies that helped you make this transition across different industries over this long career?
I would say the first factor is to step out of the comfort zone. Um, in fact, my first job was back in my hometown in Kerala, but in 3 months I left that job, which was like a semi-government job, to pursue something greater and bigger. And that is how I landed with this job in Bharat Petroleum as a management trainee, completely new to logistics, completely new to oil industry. And my first posting was in Gujarat. So I would say the in terms of the learning and development process, the first mindset which is required is to be bold enough to get out of that comfort zone.
So, sir, as a L&D functionary, like how do you see the landscape emerging, especially given the context of AI and all changing? So, what do you feel?
I think first and foremost, based on the size of the company and the complexity which is involved, I would say that the first step which is required to be done is to segregate the function of HR, admin, and L&D. Yes, in a small size company, you cannot afford to have a bigger department or multiple people to handle these things. But as the company grows, it's extremely important at least to have a specialist in L&D to handle those functions, because that is an investment which has to be done, which sometimes companies overlook, in the essence of time or with respect to cost, etc. Today, the landscape is changing, and I can speak as far as the logistics and shipping industry is concerned. The demands on the business is huge. Every day throws up a different scenario, whether it is due to geopolitics, whether it is tariffs, whether it is due to regulations which are coming up, or even the general business landscape. Foreign exchange. The logistics is one of the industry which is completely impacted globally based on how the US dollar is impacted. So the skills which are required today, I would say the biggest skill is adaptability and having the right kind of network for continuous learning. The capability to learn, unlearn, and relearn has become much more come up in the forefront as compared to any other historical times.
Mhm. So very interesting in terms of all the dynamics that you mentioned, especially the geopolitical risks and all. So any specific frameworks that you would recommend, like organizations, what are the kind of things that they need to do to adapt to this uncertainties and work in this uncertain environment?
Well, the biggest for organizations today is how fast they can make decisions. Because, first of all, there is over information, there is misinformation, connecting the right dots, and having the ability to move fast. Because risk also, or even crisis, brings in a lot of opportunities, and logistics is ripe with those kind of opportunities. Whether it was COVID, whether it is today's crisis in the Hormuz, so that becomes, for an organization, right from each and every department to assess. Gone are the days when we would have a 5-year strategy. As broad plans, business plans are there, but in terms of being able to adapt, how nimble you are, how agile you are, becomes the most important factor for an organization, not just to survive, but even to grow.
And what would be the leadership mindsets required to lead such organizations?
I would say openness,
Mhm.
and openness to ideas, openness to fresh talent which is there, who can bring in different aspects. I mean, you previously touched upon AI. Um, I remember last year the conversation was around, especially even because I'm involved in academics, is to say that how can you prevent AI being used? How can you police them? But then now it has gone completely the opposite way in terms of telling that how can we leverage that? How can you adapt it and ensure that you are trained in the right way, whether it's a student or whether it's in the corporate side. So tools such that it'll become as common, and it's already become as common as just using a smartphone or a laptop. but it becomes another tool to enhance your productivity.
So, since you mentioned you've been part of academics also, so any advice, especially to business schools, in terms of how to adapt to the changing requirements in order to create the potential talent who are industry ready?
So we always talk about industry academia partnership, and as Transworld also we believe in that. But sometimes we see that the follow up and the actions are missing. Again, we can have a number of reasons. One, of course, is the time which is required for industry, and of course, when you talk about industries, the people from the industry to invest their time in academics, which is a huge commitment. But as long as they don't see a value which comes back to them, they will always be shy of doing that. So there needs to be a very concerted action and a mindset shift in terms of telling that investing time by the industry in academics is going to ultimately benefit the industry, because the only way academic institutions can be in tune with the market is by having industry involved there. And it's not a one time lecture, it's not just a guest lecture, it has to be involved right from your curriculum development, curriculum updation, industry projects, internships, and then, of course, ultimately placement. Because what ultimately matters to the student, to the graduate, is to get the right kind of job.
So, coming to the graduates in question, so what would your advice be to the young upcoming professionals? Lot of uncertainties, lot of fear, anxieties regarding the changing workplace. So, what would your advice be?
That's it. We are in a world of overchoice, a world of chaos, and that's not going to go away, unfortunately. But I always, excuse me, give this advice that at least have one core strength. Focus on one core strength and always build on that. You may do like I've done multiple jobs, multiple say kind of functions within logistics in the last 40 years. But I've stuck to one particular core theme in terms of shipping, commercial shipping. That's been my core. And whatever I've done is a branch off from that. So I'm able to come back to that at any point of time. So today, of course, individuals would go in terms of telling multi skilling, jump from one job to another or one skill to another. That adaptability is good, but unless they have a core, they can easily get lost in terms of the multiple choices which are out there in the world.
So, any skill set or capability that you feel is essential? Because many times people feel that would these be outdated? So, any skills that you feel would be helpful in the long run?
Well, we would see this matter of skills getting outdated pretty fast in the next coming decade or even more than that as compared to what has happened the last 40 years. So, again, the skill should be in terms of being able to adapt and learn fast. And there comes in networks so that you always are in touch with the right kind of scenarios, right kind of network to guide you through that process.
So, since you bring in a lot of experience, especially you said your core interest in shipping industry. So, this is one of the industries that probably would not be the first choice for most MBA graduates. So, typical outlook is consulting, fintech, those kind of industries. So, what would your advice be? How, like in terms of career prospects in industries like shipping? So, sir, we were talking about the capabilities that future professionals should have. So, going forward, the Transworld Learning Academy is doing a lot of work in terms of bridging that industry academia gap. So, could you tell us something more about?
I would say it is again born out of a need, and today any product would be valuable. Only the need is addressed. So starting from the corporate need to ensure that we get the right skill candidates, because most of the companies are facing this huge issue of not getting the right skill candidate, and there are attrition issues. There is a cost of rehiring. So that's one segment. The second part is the academic side. So in our framework, we firmly believe that as much as we add value to corporate programs, we should invest an equal amount of time in academic institutions to go to the core of the curriculum as well as the faculty development. So that's the kind of programs which we are developing and continuing to develop in partnership with institutions like IMT to ensure that ultimately it adds the maximum value to the individual who undergoes that program, to the institution who is nurturing them, and then of course ultimately placing them into the corporate world.
Thank you. So that sounds inspiring enough in terms of the journey ahead. So, any final words of advice to especially our management students who would be looking at this podcast?
I'd say never stop learning because coming out with flying colors from an academic institution is the beginning of the learning journey. And I can vouch for that, that even today I've enrolled at least two courses at any point of time. And that learning mindset has to continue.
Thank you so much, sir, for joining us.
Thanks for the opportunity. Good luck to us.